Hello and welcome to Hegemony Revealed. I am Trina Casey and I'm here with my co-hosts Garry and Sahana. And we have the pleasure of having a guest today. Her name is Animah Kosai. And Animah is the founder of an emerging Speak Up network, a global platform to bring people together through conversations and collective action towards a better world. And I think she is the perfect guest for Hegemony Revealed because that's what we're trying to do too. Welcome.
Hi, Trina, Garry, Sahana, and everyone who's here listening, watching. I'm so honored to be part of this show, Hegemony
Awesome.
Revealed.
So tell us a little bit about your organization, its goals, and what about you? Where are you from?
Okay, so I'll start with the where am I from because you wanted to ask that question, right? And I said let's
Yeah.
hold it for this because it's a big part of what I do today is where am I from? And when I was a little kid and I was growing up in Malaysia and looked really different to the average Malaysian, I was often asked, "What are you? Where are you from?" And as a kid, that just felt really invasive. So I had a standard answer. Depended on my mood. Either I was a human being or I was Siberian. For some reason, I was just fixated on, well, I'm from Siberia. People believed it. Or I would just say, well, yeah, I'm Malaysian. So the thing is, I am a biracial. My mother and father, my late father, met in London in the 60s. In its partying heyday, they met at a party. So my mother is white English, from Lancashire, working in London at the time, and my father at that time was a student, Malay student living in Bayswater, as many Malays did at that time. And yeah, then I came along, and later on my daughter. It was really interesting because I was born in 1967, and it was only till much later I realized how 1967 was a watershed year in many regards, because I know that in the United States, that's when I think biracial marriage became permissible. And I was like stunned. Oh my goodness, because I am a product of a biracial marriage. And then also in the UK, homosexuality was decriminalized in
Mm.
1967. And there was something else that happened. I can't remember what that was, but it's like interesting year to be born. But when I was seven, so I grew up in the UK to begin with. So it's very English in my attitudes, right? Then we moved over to Malaysia when I was seven, and then I learned to speak Malay. I went to school in Malaysia, so I did all my schooling. I've worked most of my life in Malaysia. Went to university back and forth here as well in the UK. Got my law degree, became a lawyer, and I worked. First I was practicing law, then I joined the oil and gas industry, and hence that's why I would travel to India as well. That was one of the areas I covered, as well as other parts of Southeast Asia. And so this being from two cultures and having a foot in two continents and going back and forth, whether for holidays or to live or whatever, it gives you a really different perspective. And whichever group I was with, I'd either felt I belonged or I was also the outsider at the same time. And it's a
Mm.
very kind of bizarre place to be, but I'm used to it. So I would often be the devil's advocate, like, well, have you thought about it from their point of view? Because and often
Perfect.
wherever I was, I'd be doing that all the time. It makes a good lawyer, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
yes, I think in a nutshell, that's kind of my background. And it's interesting now that the world is opening up to DEI and now deconstructing colonization.
Mm.
And the other interesting thing about me, on my father's side, my grandfather was part of Malaya's independence movement.
Mhm.
So he was one of those who founded the leading Malay party at that time that negotiated this with the British to secure independence. So it's kind of interesting. I call myself a daughter of the colonizer and the colonized, and it's quite an interesting place to be. I'll stop there.
Wow, that's amazing. Your background is so fascinating and so perfect for this this platform. You and Garry have a lot in common as far as the work goes. You've been to Mumbai for work, and I have a biracial child, and I'm always navigating that world as well, um, and being multiracial myself. So it's amazing how many more connections there actually are in this world than differences. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I'm so grateful that you're on here. So, um, what we usually do is you just talk, and one of the things that I thought was fascinating about what you said was that feeling of being not belonging and belonging at the same time. And I think as a Black woman living in the United States and actually traveling globally quite a lot in my adulthood, I have that feeling all the time,
Mm,
all the time.
mm.
Yeah. So, Shahana, Garry, you guys want to jump in there? Do you have a particular question for Animah?
I'd actually love to know more about, what caught my attention was what Trina said about belonging, and
Mhm.
and in relation to that, and I don't know how it's related. What is emerging Speak Up network that you have,
Ah,
and how does that relate to, I don't know, a sense of belonging or not?
so it's interesting. So belonging is one thing, and I think there's also this sense of voice, giving voice to.
Hmm.
And because people were like, so I've been talking about speaking up for a while now, and of course I chose to become a lawyer, and with lawyers it's all about the voice, right? Lawyers are very good at speaking, talking, and lawyers will listen when they have to, when it's related to their job, but we love the sound of our voices. But the problem with that, I mean, um well, so I'll start with this, right? I also, let's go back to identity. I'm a Muslim, and that really surprises a lot of people here in the UK. What? You're a Muslim? You don't seem Muslim, or you don't look like a Muslim. Like, what does a Muslim look like? Like,
Look like.
hello, hello, So I don't wear the hijab, but there are many who don't, right? Um, and just because I'm not wearing a big, it doesn't mean I'm not Muslim. And I just want to share something. So it's something that's very deep within me, how I view the world, how I hold myself as well. There's this Hadith Qudsi, which is like the highest or the most noble of the Hadiths. And in it, it's about the creation. And God says,
Mhm.
I was a hidden treasure that desired to be known. And
Mhm.
hence then God created, the universe, life, as we know it. And looking, feeling those words, I was a hidden treasure that desired to become known. In other words, to be known means you need others to reflect back to you. You
Mm.
need others to see you, to witness you, to know that you're there. And I think that one line, I think, is in a sense the essence of every human being. I am a hidden treasure that desires to become known. And we all have that at our essence. And I think the way that the world works today, you can see that for many people, that they're being shut down, silenced, not given their space to be heard, to be seen, to be witnessed. And coming back to speaking up, and me as a my lawyer's hat, I was very interested in areas where, let's say, women were harmed at work, like sexual harassment, and then we saw the power of Me Too, right? And even before hashtag Me Too, became big, I was already looking at areas of sexual harassment. I was also looking as a lawyer areas of harm or unethical conduct, and because that was my job to address them, right? To either educate people, to investigate them, take action, and so on, draw up policies. And one of the things that really perplexed me was the silence around harmful conduct. Like, we'd investigate and say, well, if you knew this, who else knew? Oh, so and so. Well, why did nobody say anything? And it was always like, what's this silence? And at first I thought, oh, maybe this is just a Malaysian thing. But no, you'd look at cases all around the world. I'd look at Volkswagen's Dieselgate, even NASA's space shuttle Challenger, any disasters you see, harms, corruption. There are people who know, but they are unable to speak up. Or when they do speak up, there's retaliation or they're silenced
Absolutely.
through NDAs or whatever it is. So looking at all that, I'm like, yeah, we need people to speak up for harms to be addressed. So that's where I started off with. And I go like, okay, this is how you speak up. And then very quickly I realized, no, it's dangerous when people would tell me, well, I'm being sexually harassed at work. What should I do? And the first thing I go like, do you have options? How financially secure you are? Before I'd say, oh, go to HR, because it could be dangerous.
Mm.
It could be dangerous to speak up. So the other angle I looked at was the listening. Are people listening? And in listening, well, I talk about leaders who listen, and I've given a lot of training around that as well. Are
Mhm.
leaders listening? And in the listening, how are they listening, without judgment and preconceived ideas? And they're listening openly, not to punish, but to learn from and even to reflect on their own behaviors. And that's really hard, right? So that
Oh, yes. Very difficult.
real, exactly, right? I do that myself. I every now and then I go through this self-check and go like, oh my God, I can't believe Animah, you said that,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And I think and it's something I want to model, that we need to be reflecting on our own behaviors and our actions. We may say certain things, and if people call us out, okay, I was wrong, and not get, defensive. There's a whole spiel around that. And then I came to you have the speaking up, you have the listening, and it doesn't take space in a vacuum. It's somewhere, it's within a context. It's
mm.
within an environment, whether we're talking about in the workplace, whether we're talking
Within the
about
hegemony, within the
exactly.
hegemony. This is
Yeah,
this is very, very key to how the hegemony controls, manipulates, and creates a narrative for us to control us. So,
yeah. So this is the thing, that it sits within. I just learned about hegemony recently when I've been talking about it without using that word, within what I've been calling the dominance or the power structures that exist, right? So whether it's power structures in a workplace, whether it's power structures in an industry, whether it's power structures in a nation, and then we come to the world, and that's what I want to talk about. So, in terms of the Speaking Up Network, what I was seeing, and what we're all seeing, is that we see some voices are louder and take up more space than others. And we need
mm,
to hear the voices that don't have that space. And this is where me and a group of people, we said, let's create that space.
mm,
Let us create a space where the lesser heard voices have the space and the platform to share their insights, their stories, their innovations, their solutions. And it's almost like, I mean, the fires in Canada and how that engulfed, New York. Pollution
mm,
doesn't understand borders, right? I mean, the world is at crisis point already.
mm,
And what's happening now, we kind of know how we got there. And again, I'm going to pull books from time to time and just show them to you. So
mhm.
essentially, to quote Audre Lorde, right? The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So the answer
Never.
to where we are in the planet today with humanity today is not going to come from the dominant narrative in the West, right? And
I
this is
have to
where,
applaud that. I have to applaud that. If more people could understand, you can't get solutions from the people who cause the problem, because they have solutions that benefit themselves only.
and they don't understand the problems because they're not living it,
Yep.
right? There's not
Voila.
living it. So coming back to my sort of childhood and who I am, you know, living in Malaysia, and it's interesting when I travel overseas, you know, back in the, you know, the 70s, even 80s, oh, do Malaysians live on trees? Oh my God, like, hello. How insulting is that? But then
Yeah.
again, that was the narrative, right? That was the, because okay, I think people know a bit more about Malaysia now. But back then, you know, it's like, oh, it's kind of just under Thailand. And Thailand also, there was a stereotype about
Mhm.
Thailand. And Thais, I think, are the most environmentally conscious people on the planet. Well, there are others as well, but there's so much we can learn from the Thais, which
Mhm.
are not about the stereotypes that the West look at Thai people, right? So, I mean, there's huge amounts of wisdom that I'd love to see coming up. So, of course, me as a young Malaysian traveling around the world, or particularly in the United States, it was frustrating. It was like, no, and they'd look at me like, oh, you don't seem Asian, or again, right? This sort of thing. And I go, look, if all of you in the West, particularly in the United States, which has a very, I think, insular media outlook, right? If
Yes.
you could really understand how people in other countries live their lives, and you know the issues they face and how they address problems, then you know maybe you broaden your horizons to go, aha, look at this, look at that.
Mm.
One of my favorite things is, like, you know, a friend of mine from New York, who I met up with when I was there last year. Just after we met up, and I was experiencing the New York train system, subway, which is, I had heard, is among the best in the US. But me coming, and the UK is not that great, but okay, I'm gonna just leave it there. Right? You know, Europe.
It's madness. I've been on it. I know.
He went to Japan the following month, and I said, "Well, so how is Japan? You know, traveling in Japan compared to the US?" You're like, "Oh my God!" Right?
Night and
It's
day.
it's yeah, exactly. Japanese or Korean, Chinese technology is out of this world, but we're not. I mean, the West is like almost like afraid, and oh, we don't want to talk about that. But the thing is, I think the tragedy is that we have solutions in so many different parts of the planet,
Hmm.
but we're not tapping into them. We're othering. We're, you know, that sort of thing. So again, coming back to the Speaking Up Network, I would love, you know, to be able to hold spaces for conversations. And it's also a virtual platform, like a new social media platforms coming up. But beyond the platform, you know, having events and conversations and modeling that, where for me, the underlying, I'd say, requirement is that they need to be global minded, although
Absolutely.
maybe addressing a local problem, that's fine. That in having conversations, don't just have it in you know, among one nation or one country. Invite people from other continents, maybe from non-English speaking, you know, parts of the world as well, because when you have this cross fertilization of,
Mm.
you know, cultures and views and perspectives, it's incredible
Mm.
what
I
can
love
come.
that. Cross fertilization. And I always use the word connectedness because we're all intrinsically connected through every way, mind, body, spirit, we all. And I think the hegemony and the powers know this. And the only way
Mhm.
that they can rule is by compartmentalizing and segmenting away. Because when we all unite together, our voice is so strong. When we all unite together, we come solutions that benefit everyone, the planet. Like you said, globally minded people.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that Shahana has talked about is plural verse. I love, I've been using that a lot. I talk about it on my podcast. So,
Oh, love that. Plural
Shahana,
dress.
I gave you a
Wow.
shout out on that. And I love that that breaking apart that ideology is that one is the dominant. It has to be, we have to speak up together in unity for what I call the grand awakening, for us to unite together to make the world better and to make decisions in a voice. I think that the UN's purpose was to do something like that, but it just got it got dominated by the West.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, the whole Bretton Woods regime that's come up, following the United Nations with, IMF, the World Bank. There's another one I'm missing at the moment. GATT, right? So the General Agreement, World Trade Organization, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
All those systems, unfortunately, that came in place and saying, oh, we will help, nations in the global south. But oh no, Sahana's disappeared. I hope she comes back.
Shana.
But I've held these views for a long time, and then I came across this book, The Divide, Jason Hickel. And then I followed it up very quickly with this, Keen Andrews, The New Age of Empire. I mean, I read them back to back. This is the last book I read in 2022, and this is the first book I read in 2023. And I was just like, oh my God, they're saying things that I've kind of believed, but they kind of, confirmed it with facts and
figures.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is really about the divide between the global north and south. And me, living in both the north and the south, as I said, it really gives you a different view on things and the unfairness. I'll give you an example. I'm very, very interested in climate change, right? Hi, Sahana. We were just talking about
I know, I just vanished.
Okay, the north and the south. And in terms of climate change, I think one of the things that a number of us were feeling in Malaysia was like, okay, so the West, they're all nice and developed, and they have all their whatever it is, high standards of living and so on. And then now they're putting all these rules in place, which make it hard for countries in Asia and other parts, Africa and other parts of the world, to be able to meet some of those standards of living, because now there are all these rules in the name of protecting the environment. And of course, me coming from Malaysia, and we have rainforests, right? I'm going to come to this rainforest thing. And what I got really annoyed was like this blaming of the West on our oil palm. Now, yes, it's problematic, but why were we being singled out? Why is Malaysia, Indonesia, Brazil being singled out? And just recently there's the new EU deforestation directive, right? And it's very clear that, and I think it's a great directive, don't get me wrong, it's needed, it's important. What I am quite unhappy with is that it clearly singles out just certain parts of the world because of the crops it mentions: coffee, tobacco, oil palm, cattle. So, I mean, cattle is mainly Brazil, Argentina, and so on, so like, you can't cut down any more trees from this, going back a few years from here. And so as long as you don't do that, then fine, we will still buy from you. Otherwise, no, the EU is saying that. And then we're going, so back in Malaysia a few decades ago, we were going like, well, what about Europe? Where's your forests gone? Huh?
Exactly. Pointing the finger, but there's 4 more. Yeah.
Another book. This has just come out. It was Waterstone's book of the month last month. This is Guy Shrubsole, The Lost Rainforests of Britain. So me, coming from a rainforest country, I thought, wait, I'm still living in a rainforest country in England. We have rainforests? Excuse me. Did you know this, Garry?
No idea. Thank you for the education.
Yeah, I had no idea either.
This is your country, Garry, and you didn't know this. And so I got the book, and I'm absolutely fascinated. It actually shows the regions where there still are pockets, tiny, but how much of the forest we in England wiped out over the past hundreds and thousands of years. in the more recent times, past few hundred years, we cut down our forests to build ships to go to war, essentially, and colonize the world, essentially.
That's where it went. That's where it went.
There you
Thank
go.
you for saying that, because I was going to say it. You read my mind. They just did what they did in their own country and took it around the whole world. I think we talked on the last episode about lawns. What's the purpose of a lawn? It has no purpose. It looks pretty. They just cut everything down, and anything that's purposeful, anything that can sustain life, that can feed people, they decimate. What's in the deeper psychosis of this is what I'd like to touch on sometimes.
Talking about oh no, I have to go into not psychosis. So going back to this colonizing thing, I was just talking to somebody earlier today about this. Malaysia or Malacca specifically. I mean, so Sahana's nodding, right? So we learn history in school. Like Malacca was this huge empire, and it covered up to bits of Thailand, bits of Indonesia, and I mean, they weren't called Thailand and Indonesia in those days, right? So it was huge, and it was a big trading empire, and it's spices. It was all about spices, right? And this was like through the 13th, 14th century, 15th century. And who would come and trade? It would be from China. The Chinese would come by their boats and they would trade, and the Indians would come by their boats and they would trade, and the Arabs would come, and it was just this big outpost of, as I say, cross fertilization. Of course, a lot of intermarriages and things like that, and it was trading like you still see the Chinese behaving today, right? Trading, and that's what it was. There was no there was no sense of, oh, I will now occupy your land, right? Then in the 16th century, so 1511 specifically, because this is what every Malaysian learns, right? The Portuguese arrived. I know they came through Goa, right, in India as well. So Portuguese came, and they came and they controlled and they took over. So the Sultanate, the Malacca Sultanate, fell in 1511 to the Portuguese. So there've been no sultans in Malacca since. Very great sultans before that. And so then after the Portuguese, then the Dutch came. And then the Dutch then traded with the British, or rather the East India Company, traded to trade out Malacca and what was then called Batavia, which is now Jakarta. They were both traded between the Dutch and the British, and I'm like, what audacity is that? Not even, here you are, here's my land, have it, and so that happened. So and different states in Malaya were through different levels of control and colonization by the British, right up till 1957 for West Malaysia, and then 63 for North Borneo, Sabah, and Sarawak, when they joined together with Singapore. So essentially, it's interesting how the Asian empires, Indians and the Chinese and so on, were very much peaceful and respectful and treated each other as, more or less the same, compared to how the Western or the European empires were doing it. So this need to control as opposed to collaborate with.
Yeah. And I'll throw in the African too, because a lot of people don't know is that the Africans were traveling via boat as well. And many people think that, and there's lots of evidence that the Egyptians were in Scotland, traded with Scotland. There's artifacts found there. Also, that the Africans, of course, were on the spice. Well, I'm losing the word. Trade, spice route as well. And so, I mean, because the biggest commodity was salt. Africans had tons of salt, and part of the reason why there was a king, Mansa Musa, would be Elon Musk, Bezos, what's his name, Microsoft dude, Gates, all combined wealth. He had that right now. Okay. He basically traveled around the world and destabilized, throwing gold coins out. He's destabilized Egypt,
Wow.
and so one of the things that I always try to make sure people know is that Africa was a huge part of that trading route. You know, we just don't get that history in Western
And
civilization.
this is exactly why we want to hear the voices from other parts of the world. And I think there'd be so much learning in that. I sometimes talk about the analogy of an orchestra, right? So if you think of the earth as a symphony, as a beautiful symphony, and you'd expect all the instruments to be playing, but what we're hearing right now are just loud trumpets,
Yep.
right? So
Oh
here,
yeah.
the trumpets have their role; they're needed, right? Yet we're missing this, the lovely nuance of the violins, or we're
Mm,
listening, the rhythm and the very heartbeat of the drums,
mm,
and it's almost like the trumpets decided they were conducting the orchestra, and they decide who is in the center of the stage, and then they decide the mic levels of different parts of the orchestra, right?
mm.
So like, oh, violins, instead of being in the center, you find them somewhere there at the back and all, but you're there, violins are they're represented, they're there, you're just kind of half falling off the stage, you know what I mean? And I feel that's what the global stage looks like. We look at all these photos of G7 and OECD, and they've all got a certain look. Okay, you might have one Japanese prime minister there, and that's it. Broaden it to what, G24 something? Okay, now you've got Brazil thrown into the mix, and that's it. Or maybe go wider. Okay, Indonesia and India come in. But the broad, if you look at, how the world order is shaped, we're just hearing the trumpets. And I think we're missing out on these beautiful symphonies that we could be, experiencing.
So tell me, Anima, how does Speak Up work? How does this, for example, how do your organization, give those voices? What do you do to
So
make it happen?
well, for the past couple of years, it's been more like me and my team, we've been hosting, conversations in various spaces, whether it's Clubhouse and other places. Now we're up leveling one in a much bigger way, in that we have got a media platform, which is absolutely new. It's still going through alpha testing, but it's public. In other words, actually, people can already join if they want to. And it's kind of like, okay, you come in, but the house is still being built. But the great thing is that if you're sitting in a house that's still being built, you might be able to tell the architect, maybe the windows should be there instead of there. And one of the things I
Right.
want to do is, as we're bringing people in, I want to invite them into conversation like, how do we? Because to me, psychological safety is very important. So, what is the code of conduct for us? What's okay, what's not okay, and if somebody may be doing something or saying something that's harmful or whatever, how do we kind of pull them aside and educate them? Because I don't
Mm,
really like the kicking out. I'd rather that people kind of learn and
mm,
are open to learning, and we'd invite people who want to be open to
mm,
learning, right? um, because to me the greatest thing is that we have these conversations that are multicultural, multinational, and in the Speaking Up network, we're designing it. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned the United Nations. We're designing it along the lines of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, because we want to be inviting people who want to focus on action, or groups. Either they could be focusing on exploring, okay, men exploring what are women going through so we can be better allies, right, Garry? Hands up,
mhm,
for example.
mhm,
Or it could be a bunch of people who are like in Malaysia, we're looking at the Southeast Asian haze, a bit like what New York went through recently. Um, a group of people coming together, like, what do we do about this? Do we need to look at the laws, lobby policymakers, talk to corporates, get people to understand what changes they need to make, share resources like the laws. I just talked about the EU directive, and how does that impact us? So groups that are coming together who want to address solutions. I mean, also here on the LinkedIn, we have the anti-racism group, right, which I'm also part of, and we're talking about, okay, the anti-racism group, because it's in so many different places. What if we were all in one place?
Right.
And they sit also on the Speaking Up network, and broaden those conversations, so it's people from all parts of the world can be part of that. And one of the things that's really big for us is we talk about psychological safety and what that looks like. We also talk about accessibility. So from several purposes. One, for example, people have various different types of vision impairments, whether they're blind, they're colorblind. They have certain neurodivergent conditions which make them feel overwhelmed when they look at. So our platform is, or will be, because we're still building it, is to allow people to choose what they want it to look like for them. What
That's
suits.
wonderful. That's wonderful. And I think that, like being neurodivergent myself, I think that is so helpful for people to start building platforms with that in mind, that, you say you want to watch something, you need to you need captions, or you need to be able to zoom in closer to read it in a better. These type of options that are available is so important. Anyways, just to respect everybody's time, let's jump in a little bit. Garry, did you have any insight or questions for Animah? That because you've been pretty quiet today.
I'm role modeling, passing the mic, Animah. I hope you're proud of me. I hope you're proud of me.
You're such a good student, Garry.
Thank you, Animah. Thank you, Animah.
But explain for the men who are listening what pass the mic means then.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. But it's really important. So I think, so Animah, among some other collaborators, are leading a group which is actually basically a channel, a LinkedIn channel, where there's a lot of men, and actually the title's been iterated right recently around men supporting women. And the passing the mic thing is something I like to think I've been developing the last few years because of this. So one of the points I want to make, Trina, is what I call generative listening. You may have come across Nancy Klein's work, Time to Think. And this is really something I try to embody in the work that I do. But I think this pass the mic thing for me, it's really funny, Animah. The more we can listen generatively through our heart, gut, mind connection without taking up the space, it becomes easier, particularly for men, to allow the space for others. Because once we feel that integrated connection of head, heart, gut, you're not fighting with just your ego anymore. And there's something about, we need to allow ourselves as men to feel, because the more we feel, the easier it is to pass the mic. And that's probably what I'd like to offer into the space at the moment, is just around that, an invitation to my kinfolk, my menfolk, is really like, don't fight feeling. Go into it like a skid when you're in the car. Like when you're skidding and it's like, oh, I don't want to feel it. That feels horrible. It's horrible. Go into the skid. Go into the skid, because that will create space for our colleagues all around the world. So yeah, that's probably just where I am at the moment. Thanks very much.
Oh, I love that.
That's beautiful.
Lean in to the skid.
Yeah, I love that. I've been so very grateful to have created this with Garry and Sahana, and because this is what I see the world becoming if everybody goes in with the intention, and it gives me hope. I'm a mother of a young child, 12 years old, and the world that we're leaving right now is like we're living in right now is not the world that I feel comfortable leaving him in. to, he's neurodivergent too, ADHD. And then it's just like, we could do so much better. We could do so much better if everybody woke up and things were transparent and not controlled by one narrative. We are people from all over the world coming together in one space talking. And so I applaud what your Speak Up is doing. I'd love to be involved. So let me know how I can be
Thank
involved.
you.
And is there anything else anybody else like to share? No?
I just wanted to say that I loved what Animah you said about the orchestra and what happens when, whether it's the trumpet or whatever, when one instrument takes center stage
Mm,
and others are, either eliminated or quietened or, like you said, literally falling off the stage, then what we get is not harmony. What we get is no longer that emergent, that feeling of jazz where people are just playing
mm,
with each other.
Yes.
What we get is a suppression of other voices and
mm,
sounds, and whether it's human or other than human or more than human. So what you get is this one narrative or one sound peaking while others are sublimated.
mm,
And that doesn't make for a balanced, healthy planet in any sense of the word.
mm,
And that's exactly what we are experiencing all around us, within and without. And what Gary said about listening generatively in an integrated manner, I was listening to y'all, and it just felt like so much learning can happen in the space of 42 minutes and 49 seconds, 50 seconds. Literally,
Oh, look, 49 seconds. Yes.
that's exactly what was happening. I mean, you are, like you said, you're from Malaysia, you've lived in Britain. My daughter currently lives in Malaysia. I've been there, and I'm I'm an Indian fully, but that doesn't mean I've always felt or even feel I belong.
mhm.
I don't. On so many
Yeah.
fronts, I don't. Even though I'm quote unquote an Indian by all,
Mm,
genetically and in every which way, but I don't feel I belong to what we have evolved into as a culture.
mm, mm,
99% of the time, I don't feel I belong, and I've traveled the world a fair bit, but again, it was like half belonging and half not belonging. And being from a colonized nation, I had an English upbringing in an Indian context, which was weird to say the least.
yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's what you're speaking up is doing is will be amazing because we need such spaces where voices intermingle and interweave, and it's not just a single story, but many
Yeah.
many stories coming together. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Just a real quick bit. The reason why I ended up in Mauritius was because I was looking to move to Malaysia. I was typing in, and I miss punch.
Oh
And then, well, also Malaysia's the borders were closed during COVID, so
no. Oh
I
yeah.
was going to go there, and because I've been to Malaysia, I love Malaysia, so I was really disappointed when the borders were closed because I was like, I want to move there. I want to travel around. It's a beautiful country,
That's great.
and
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for this awesome, as usual, session that we had here on Hegemony Revealed. We're going to be getting pretty soon. I'm going to put this on a Spotify, the audio for this. Um, I'm going to be uploading the previous episodes in this one very shortly. So if you don't have time to watch these lives, you can go back and listen to them later. And then, of course, Gary has them on YouTube with links. so you can watch our beautiful faces. And and thank you again. Anybody else would like to sign out, or are we ready to go?
May I make an invitation? I'd love it if everyone would like
Yeah.
maybe just to check out just 30 seconds. What's something new? What's been confirmed for you, or something new that you're thinking about as you exit this conversation today? Maybe that could be a nice little checkout.
All right. Go ahead, Sahana, you start.
I think what is really staying with me is the fact that we can do so much better if we didn't have a few voices dominating. So much better. It was never meant to be a universal planet. We are a pluriverse.
Yes. Garry?
I'm going to pass the mic to Animah and go last. Thank you.
Okay.
For me, I'm just looking at the four faces of us, and we all look so different, and we're all in different places, right? We have different backgrounds. And to me, this is how it should be, right? And this is the future. And I mean, just one last thing I want to say. I think the future of our planet is in young people from all around the world, particularly indigenous people who have that wisdom when it comes to nature. And I think the rest of us who are privileged in the West should just get out of the way. And what we offer is money and support, right?
Right.
For these younger people, indigenous people, to make it happen. I think the future is in their hands.
That's beautiful. I love that so much. As I've learned so much on this. As usual, your voices are always making me feel uplifted after these calls and these lives. What I really am excited about is that there are more platforms evolving like ours that can coalesce together and work together to create a bigger purpose and bigger mission and a grander awakening for the world.
Lovely. Thank you all. I'm just going to play back. My checkout is some very real deep learning. I loved, Animah, how you spoke about treasure, reflection, listening. They are all countercultural, counter hegemonic states of being. The more we can see the treasure in ourselves and others, the more that we listen to ourselves and others, and the more we reflect and create the space to see that in one another, hegemony will just collapse, and it is collapsing.
Yep.
So I want to say thank all three of you. Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I can't wait to experience the Speak Up platform. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool.
Yes.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.